Hi, Eddie. Right, so I'm Jim. I'm a public company CEO.
Yeah, exactly. Unfortunately, I only
Seemed
have
like a
the
good
questions
thing
for
before.
Jillian. How does it feel working at the Financial Times?
Let me think.
I got to go.
Yeah, just keep going with
yeah.
those. There'll be one in there I can answer.
Okay. No, so when you were speaking earlier today, you had the 87% number up, and you suggested, but without giving a whole lot of detail, that there were technological approaches to getting more than the 13% engaged. And I was interested in what you were getting at, and maybe what you've tried at Steelcase that seems to be having that effect.
Yeah, so, all these things have to start with, if you ever start with trying to figure out how to use technology to solve a problem like that, you end up doing what the mistake a lot of people make, and we make ourselves when it comes to product development, which is that you've got the solution all figured out, now you're just trying to figure out how you're going to throw it at somebody. And we always start this by focusing on people instead. So it is a people problem. Engagement is a people problem, and it's mostly going to be a people solution. And so if you think about, for example, what gives people meaning at work, and it might be the fact that in large companies, as I said earlier, that it's difficult for employees to connect with their customers and connect even further with their users of a product, and this is true for us. I'll just give you one example of this. We sell to corporations, and then corporations have people who work in those corporations who use our products. So it's tempting for us to say, well, we have to focus on the buyer, the decision maker, and historically that's what a lot of people have done in the industry. Because users don't get a vote, mostly. The product just shows up at their desk. And we decided instead that we would really focus on users. And we believe that if we got it right for the users, we would eventually win more business, because the users would speak to people within the company and say, this is the kind of stuff we need. So we tried to turn it around in that way. Now, how do you use people technologies and then other technologies? One of the things that we have done more and more is we host customers in our spaces, places where our people work. And it would be, again, tempting to just bring them into nice customer retreats or customer experience locations where we can give them good food and we can host a well-oiled experience. But instead, we just kind of walk around. So we'll walk all around our buildings, and we never really know what's going to happen because we never know what the customer is going to ask. And so we will, quite often I'll be walking and a customer will ask us a question, and we will just pull an employee up out of their chair. They might be just walking by, and we'll ask the employee that question. So there's a non-technical way, but I would still say it's a technology in a sense, because it's how you engineer the customer experience can either be to protect customers and users from your employees, or to actually do it the other way around and say, I actually want to do this in a way that even though I don't know what's going to happen, I would like to err on the side of giving employees a chance to feel that. And if you think about technology, we capture these moments too with customers using video, and we'll often have ways of through our town halls and through other meetings to show our employees the impact that they're having on people's lives. It's not about how much do we sell or did it help us meet quarterly earnings. It's what were these people trying to do? What state were they in before? How did the way we engage with them help them find a more meaningful way of organizing the way they work? I love some of the stories we heard here today. And then help everyone feel that, you know what, this is what we do. This is part of what we do, is we help everyone love how they work.
Mm-hmm. I know you're doing some experimentation with sort of the Internet of Things, and if I understand it, it's making office products, office furniture, whatever, smart and connected, and presumably interacting with users and with each other. Can you talk about maybe some of the experiments that you've launched or
yes.
are hoping to
launch?
Yes.
This is kind of humbling stuff after you follow Lynn and Henry. My world is about very simple things sometimes. So, for example, you've all struggled at some point with trying to get a meeting started, and how do you connect your laptop to the projector on the screen, on the ceiling that's aimed at a screen? And we have sociologists and anthropologists who would go out and they would wait for meetings to start to study the meeting. And the most interesting thing we found is that it takes like 5 or 10 minutes to start a lot of these meetings. You'd have people that would stand up on the conference table, a very expensive conference table, just trying to fiddle with the projector. And so we said, well, there must be a way to solve that. So without going into details, we developed some products that made it very easy for people to connect their devices to displays. And if you do it the same way every time, you get good at it. And if you find that same technology in every room you walk into, then you become an expert at it. And it reduces the stress and it accelerates the process of getting started. So now we keep going. Another experience, we love working on experiences that everybody hates, at work. So all of you have been, probably even the last few days, been on a conference call, a phone conference call. They're hideous experiences. You're connected, you can't hear well, you're at the airport, there's announcements, somebody is dropped off the call. There's actually a fascinating YouTube video on this topic. It's hilarious, except that I've lived through these conference calls myself, and it's not so hilarious when you've experienced it. And so, we engage in things like that. How can we help technologies simply let people do what they want to do, which is have a conversation without the technology getting in the way? Another example is video conferencing, which in its first incarnation was, again, hopeless. You had to go to a very special room that was designed like a TV studio. You were all arranged carefully in a rigid arc facing the cameras and the screens. This is a room you would never go to if you didn't have to use video conferencing, right? You would never go there. And here you are having some of the most important meetings in the world. And by the way, space and technology shape behavior. So we also learned when we watched this that if you had 8 people in a room, everyone would be talking to everyone over the course of the meeting. If you have 6 people in the room and 2 people on the screen, the people in the room interview the people on the screen as if it's some sort of a news show. And so all the social interaction changes just because it looks like we're here to interview them. And so that's exactly what we do. So if you can step back from that and say, how might we think about video conferencing the same way we think about other everyday technologies? And how could we actually make the technology work harder to come around us in a way that it's more human? Let's design the space so you have a human face-to-face interaction and let technology just be a layer that gets added on. So those are things that are fairly in the now. Things that are more in the far that we're exploring and you have to believe me here that I believe that the future is an engaged workforce, and that the role of corporations and people like me, managers, is not to look over people's shoulders and monitor behavior and use data to try to manipulate behavior in some way. You have to believe that, otherwise you don't want to see corporations do anything with technology. But if you do believe that, and you say, maybe the purpose of technology is not to give more information to me, but it actually helps all of us who work in space every day. You begin to wonder what the potential would be if the spaces were more aware. So if the space actually knew what your preferences were, it knew who you were, it knew how you like to work. And we've done some experiments around this in, again, very simple ways. So there's a room that we do a lot of experiments on ourselves. So there's a room I work in periodically where when I go in, I can change not just the light intensity of the room, but I can change the color temperature. So I can have it go from cooler to warmer. And over time, I've discovered what I really like. So at first I thought, well, maybe this is what everybody likes. But everybody I've brought in there, I ask them to vote. And people are all over the place. Some people like it cool, some people like it warm. What you really discover is we're all different. But what if the space knew each of our differences and each of our preferences, and you actually got to choose things like that, or the background sound in a space, or how private it was in terms of acoustic privacy or visual privacy? If you got to do things like that, if you were actually able to engage not just in the meeting, but everything about it, how you cast that room, and when you walk into the room, it's waiting for you. It's already been set up. Could that make a difference in the work experience? Could that mean that you go home at the end of the day feeling more energized than when you arrived? So those are some of the things we're thinking about for the future of workplaces and how technology might be put in.
To follow up on that, so let's say non-technological, we didn't talk a lot about, we were talking about humanity and the dignity of the worker. I didn't hear a lot of discussion about sort of workplace geography. And you're in it, you're thinking about it, you're thinking about the future, and when I was at Time Magazine, we all had perimeter offices with TVs. Then we expected that, and then they threw us out to the cube farms. Then we decided, no, that's good, and now it's sort of open, and that's.
I'm sorry about all that.
Yeah, they were a lot of your products, but and now we're sort of it's all open. We try to figure out individual space and collaborative space. Do you have strong thoughts about the geography that not only increases efficiency of the company, but kind of respects the dignity of the worker?
Yeah, I think there's, when you talk about geography, are you talking about?
Layout, sort of office.
Yeah. So, again, starting with human problems. The number one and number two complaints in offices around the world is individuals are too hot or too cold. And you know who you are out there. Some of you who are generally too hot, and some of you are generally too cold. And you could solve that in lots of different ways. But what's really interesting when you dig into that is they're often sitting right next to each other. So if you're the facility manager and you're trying to get that right, you go, well, what am I going to do? If I turn it up, then the two warm people are going to be even more uncomfortable. If I turn it down, then you get the idea, right? So the problem really isn't that the temperature is wrong. The problem is the idea that we're going to force people to sit next to each other because, I don't know, alphabetical order or job function or something meant that they had to sit next to each other, and all day long they're miserable. So why can't we break rules like that? So one part of the geography is, what if we all could choose how we wanted to work at any given point in time? Yes, you can go to some assigned space if it's been assigned to you. These days, a lot of companies are experimenting with not having assigned space. But what if you had freedom and you could actually get up and move? So what if you actually had information too, so that when you walked into the space, if you want the warmer area, you actually know where that is. There's an app for that tells you what's warm or what's cold. And you could find the space that's most comfortable. What if when you felt like you needed a time to concentrate, you could go to a place where you could have limitless privacy? Or when you wanted to re-energize by connecting to other people, you could get up and move and do something like that. So the problem with geography of the office is twofold today. One, we don't give people enough choices that are literally way too standardized in most offices. And again, true around the world. There isn't enough variety, so people go to the coffee shop or they go someplace else because they can't find it where they work. The second thing is there's not enough freedom. Company policies and company behaviors have led to this idea that I kind of have to sit where I was assigned, and I start my day here, I'm going to end my day there. And I think both of those could break. So imagine in a totally different world, you could have a workplace that has a much wider degree of variety and much more freedom for people to choose what's right for them in any given moment.
Mm-hmm. So last question before you go. You also mentioned in your earlier panel, you talked about leaders being curators of culture. And I'm interested what you mean by that, and at Steelcase, particularly during a time of transformation. Talk more about that.
There's one thing you learn when you, so I've been CEO for 2 years, and it's true for me, but it's true for really all the people who are leaders, that there's a lot of symbolism involved in what you do, and then there's a lot of reality to what you do. So I'll talk about one symbolic thing and then kind of a reality of how we work in an experiment we're doing. So when I go to a factory, there's data everywhere, and we have lots of factories. And when I walk in, at first the teams would present to me cost information. Here's what our performance metrics were, here's what our productivity metrics were, here's our goals for the coming quarter, and so on. Of course, those are all important metrics. But we changed the order so that whenever we do this presentation now, we start in a different part of the metrics. We start with safety. And what we found is that you never find a plant that has a good safety record that has bad cost performance. Like if they've got safety right, it turns out they get everything right. Because if you're running a plant that's safe, then you care about people. And if you care about people, they get it. And almost everything else takes care of itself. So that's one aspect of thinking about culture and the symbolism and things that you can do as leaders. Another one, though, and this is what I've been wrestling with lately. So in our company, we've been trying to, we have a very open culture. Yes, we have people like me and vice presidents. We have a floor, but it's kind of like off to the side. It's not at the top of the building. And it's a very open space. There isn't security. Anybody can kind of go through there. Over the last few years, we've been trying to push more decision-making down in the organization so that we do less deciding. And as we've done that, that space has gotten quieter and quieter because there's fewer meetings that take place there. So one of the things we're rethinking now is to say, well, what is our job anyway? What's the job of leaders in a company? If it's not deciding, then what should it be? And if it is about curating culture, as I mentioned before, then you can't do that in a space where you expect people to bring problems to you. You kind of have to be out there on your hands and knees in the organization, feeling the little subtle shifts, the subtle changes, the weak signals in the organization noticing that two people who don't normally meet together are suddenly meeting together. And we've got interesting places to do that. So we have a university called our Learning Center. We're actually building a new one in Munich. We have an innovation center, and we put those two things together. And what we're going to do now is take the leaders in the company, and we're going to put our spaces right in the middle of that space. So it won't be a separate leadership community. It's really, we're on a hallway, so a hallway that connects these two areas where people pass every day. We'll position ourselves on kind of the banks of that river so that we feel that energy of the organization passing through. And if we need privacy, we can always withdraw and get privacy. But again, we're always experimenting, and we're hearing this from our clients. A lot of people are feeling like the idea of a leadership floor doesn't seem to make sense anymore if you think about leadership in this new context. So,
Thanks very much.
thank you.
Thank you, Jim King.